Hello the internet, and welcome to Wednesday Streams. I'm Dom Davis, and we're going to be building a bot, hopefully more successfully than we did last week. This is now part 5 of a 4-part series, because maths is for other people. But basically we've decided to extend the series, and I will be going on for another 4 weeks, possibly more. We shall see. So far in the series we've had the first stream where I set up a Go project, and got the basics of the bot sort of set up, got continuous integration set up. In the second part we looked at getting the bot connected to Discord and doing some things. Part 3 we started the setup with AWS and getting this whole thing deployed in a fashion that will make it easy to maintain and look after in the future. Session 4 should have been finishing that up and then getting on with some more code. However, it did not go to plan. We've all had those days, and that was my day. So it was 2 hours of making a small amount of progress. However, one of the things about these streams is we have not pre-prepared everything. This is not some twee little toy which can be thrown together by anyone, and this isn't some flash pre-prepared script where I can just turn around and go bang, 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 it's done, aren't I awesome? This is actually me developing the stuff as I go. Now, I do have experience in doing this, so I'm not doing this completely blind, and we'll see later that I'm actually going to be using some things that may not be optimal because I don't want to be learning new stuff as I do the stream. However, it does allow you to see when things go wrong, and it does allow you to see how to deal with, as is the case last week, a bad day. We made progress. That's all you really need to take is the fact that if you're making progress, you're doing well. Unfortunately, with these streams, I can't go and reference some of the extra material I have easily because it's broadcast to the internet, and I can't do my normal thing of sort of getting up and taking a half-hour walk. Which would have solved this problem entirely, mainly because you would then be sat watching a blank screen for half an hour, which is no fun for anyone. Anyway, we finished last week with me so close to having the bot deployed, and so I've cheated a little bit over the past day or two and just finished that deployment off. There was very little to do, but we'll go over first what those changes were. And how I finally got it set up. Then we're going to go off and start writing some commands, probably a sort of a status command to start off with, just to make sure it's up, running, and has the correct version. So let's swap to that. There we go. Right. The other thing I've done is I've created a bot test channel because the bot games channel was not necessarily just for testing bots. This one I am able to warn people that you may get streamed if you're here. I may also be able to lock down who can use this. I don't know how that works with bots for now. But you'll notice we have the bot. It's connected, it's running, this is all running in AWS. So there were a few things that went wrong. I've closed the issue that we were working on because it's now actually running. So this is our Fargate deployment. I've changed the task definition ever so slightly, although that turned out to be a red herring. All I've done there is change the config file name I'm using to config.json, just because it made more semantic sense to call it that. The other changes I've made were not actually relevant for the problems that we were having. The main issue was that the binary was not running, and it turns out, if I go off to my pull requests, as is always the case of these things, it was something small and stupid and possibly not something that you would know. So this is the pull request, and this is the diff. All that was missing is a flag, cgo underscore enabled, set to 0. Now what was happening here is that Go by default uses libc for certain things on Linux systems. The Linux kernel, not the operating system, but the kernel does not handle networking directly. It requires libraries and various other things. This is not true for other operating systems, but Seago basically says we're going to use libc. It's reasonable to expect that libc will be available on the systems that these are running. And it is, except for the fact that I'm running this in a system with nothing, because we are basically running from the scratch environment. So what we want to say is bake in all the stuff that you would be getting from libc, and that's what the Seago enabled does. So our binary was failing to run because basically it wasn't finding the libraries that it expected to find on the operating system. Incidentally, we can ignore that incident, I believe. I use Safari on a Mac, which apparently is having some issues with Bitbucket, but nothing major. I did check earlier. And yes, I like Safari, leave me alone. Anyway, that got pushed out. The binary started working, and then we had an issue reading the config file from S3, and the reason being is I'd forgotten a step. So if we go have a look at S3, under our buckets, I had created a policy which basically says that I am allowed to access this bucket from within the now I incorrectly said VPC, the virtual private cloud we are in. That is not true. That is not how this works. So previously I had the VPC ID here. You don't want the VPC ID. What you actually want is a VPC endpoint ID. So the step that I'd forgotten, let's go have a look at VPC. And this became immediately obvious when I went and looked at one of the other deployments I had. You have endpoints. And what I needed to do here was create an endpoint, do a search for S3, select the S3 gateway, and it creates this endpoint for you. And then you take the endpoint ID for that policy. So basically you're saying we're coming from this VPC and please create this endpoint that I can access S3. So with that in place, everything suddenly started working, and we are now in a position where hopefully the DevOps section of this is over, and whenever we make any changes, they should just be reflected and deployed. That is the plan. We all know how plans go. But anyway, so first of all, we need an issue to be working off. So let's go back to our issues. And at the moment, I think the bot just does ping. I mean, it's been a while since we looked at the code, but I think it just responds to ping. And that's not really great. So the first thing we want to do is the ability to actually work out what version of the bot we got. This will tell us whether we've been able to update it and whether we've got the correct version out there. So we're going to allow the bot to respond to a version command. To me, it's an enhancement, and let's create that. It should be issue 5. Bomb. So get new issue 5, and let me just close all of this rubbish. Actually, it's probably easier if I just do this. Doink. This is the machine that I do all of my work on, so understandably I have an awful lot of stuff on here. Right, so you can get added to the git ignore while I'm here, just in case I go. There's nothing in that particular file, but it's always better to be defensive on these things, just in case I start adding config data in there and then accidentally checking it into git and it all goes wrong. Anyway, so if you remember how the bot is set up, we've got our excuse me, so we've got our mango file. And one of the things that we added is this build version, build hash, and build timestamp, which we can use as part of a version response. So we've got our actions up here. with our little ping action and our handler that actions need to implement. Now, what we can actually do at this point is copy and paste. Why not? So we're going to call this version. Now we're going to call it about. And then, of course, it's going to whinge because a load of stuff is duplicated. Oops, too far. About isn't going to need much because all the data we have for about comes from a different point. However, that may not be accessible to us. We may have to look at that in a second. Right. So about. Where's the bot to respond? Actually, and just by writing the comment, I suddenly realised this is possibly not about, this is status. I know people don't like writing documentation and comments and stuff, but it helps you think about what it is that you're doing. And you find that you start using words in your comments, and you're like, okay, that's actually the word that I should be using. So this actually becomes status. So then status just displays information about the bot. Change those very quickly. Peeping to status. Replace all of those. That's the status action. And then here we're going to be replying with version information. Spell. Right. So status. I'm also going to respond to the version just to allow a few extra things, and then we need to be able to build a version string. Let's go have a look down here, and it all goes into our config. So we are going to need a pointer to our config setup. Well, not necessarily a pointer, but just something that holds the config setup. So config.settings. Thank you. And you can tell I use the same pattern everywhere. Every single project I've got has a config settings. And then let's just have a look and find out whether that is actually a pointer or not. So down here, let's do a quick look there. No, it's not. Now we don't actually need to give this a name. What we can do is actually use it as an anonymous type within the struct, and that basically just exposes everything that's on that type to the type it's a parent of. So what we can do now is equals format.sprintf, which is a way of formatting a string. The name should be in there as well, so we can do the name, %s is for string. Then we can do the version number, which is again going to be a string. What else have we got in there? Build time, which is a string as well. I don't think we care about the hash. So you'll notice that's giving me warnings because I've put 3 formatting directives in there but not put anything to go in there. So what we need now is the name, the version. Right, where have I hidden those? I'm being dumb. Completely forgotten. We don't need the settings because those version details are baked into the binary when we build the binary. So that actually makes our life slightly simpler. So now this just becomes, no, we do need the settings because we want the name, but we don't get the version information from there. So get the name, and then we've got config.version and config. Timestamp. Put that. Okay, so one of the things we can do with case statements, if we're going to do the same thing for two cases, is we can just enumerate them, and then we can just return v. And that should be our status endpoint. Now we need to wire that in. Now we need to actually get that put into the bot. So where did we set? Here we are. Here are our actions. So we're going to give this some space, and we can turn around and go actions.status, and we need to give it the settings. Just trying to work out why that wasn't auto-completing for me. We'll soon find out. So this becomes settings. It's just been slow, that's all. So I believe that's it. There's only one way to find out. We'll make the project. Unfortunately, my machine is being hammered by OBS, so things are running a little slowly. Now, ironically enough, you'll notice that cgo enabled equals 0 was set on my normal build. It just happened to be basically a copy-paste error. Now, one of the other things I might do is actually get rid of having to use the bot name before the commands. We might make this configurable later, but it strikes me as being, I don't know, it doesn't appeal to my my sense of niceness. But before we even go there, I've just noticed something. We've only got 50% coverage statements on our status, or on our actions, mainly because status doesn't have any tests, but they're easy enough to copy. So we've added that. We want a new go file as a status underscore test, and we can probably actually get away with just some examples on here. So we can do func example, thank you, status handle, and example status ID. So these are fairly trivial tests, especially the ID one, but it does mean that you've got the coverage at 100%, and it means that you are then very aware of the fact if you're not covering stuff. And that's just why I'm using examples for these, because we don't need to do a huge amount of testing, basically. With ID, we're effectively testing that the return statement works. However, it does mean that should we go through and change it for whatever reason, we may pick up on things. So this is just going to be oops, it needs to be under the test package, actions .status .id. One of the other things that the tests like this can be useful for is if you are using them in tests, you're actually using your API, and sometimes you'll find if you've got pointer functions, that is, if that one's a pointer to status, then you can't actually use it in this fashion. Go is clever enough that it will reference and dereference pointers once a variable has been allocated. But if you're allocating on the fly here, this is not a pointer and it can't dereference that. turn that into a pointer, and so you get problems. So even though this test is trivial, we are testing our API as well, and testing our spelling. And if I remember rightly, it's the status action. Let's have a quick look. Hurrah! So this one becomes a little bit harder. Let's just see what we did with ping. Right, so we added a basic test, and then some of the edge cases. So actually, I'm just going to copy this for reference. I'll throw most of it away, but normally I would work on a bigger screen with the editor split left and right, so I can see two pieces of code at the same time and reference things. I can't do that in this setup because my machine just dies if I try and use the bigger screen. So we'll just copy paste it to provide me with the reference that I want. So this is going to be, I think, the status, and that's all going to be fine. And what we expect to see here is, no, we need config. So settings, config.settings, wrong one, entirely the wrong one. That one. Right. If the formatter has stopped messing around with me, let's try that. No, that. Thank you. And name. I'm just going to call it bot. And in fact, that doesn't need to be on the new line. That can be all up there. So what we expect to see is we expect to see bot. Then we expect to see a build number, which I believe is dev. No, it's unset. And unset is just unset. So we expect to see unset, unset. Now we could go set those things. Of course. Build unset. We could go set those things, but then I've got to put in code to reset them because my test will have changed what the code is doing, what the variables are set to, and for such a simple test, I really don't think it's worth it. Why are you still failing? Because I called the bot, and because it has a colon after it. There we go. No, there we don't go. This is where my wonderful dyslexia kicks in. It was built, not build. Right. No such thing as a simple test. Okay, so we want to check the same thing with version, which we can just do by doing this again. And oops, we should just get the same output. And the reason why I've put that in the example is because it's showing both usage. And then the last thing we want is the this test. So, oops, status test, no test status even. Yeah, put that in there. Actually, I'm going to ignore irrelevant text even, and let's put in about, because that's what we were going to do. Dun, 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 dun. Multiple things for that. That one, thank you. So we should now have, let's run the entire test suite, why not? Go nuts. Wonderful. Now I have a nice little talk called coverage. It's just an alias to some things, just to see what is and isn't covered. And in fact, we still haven't got because I am better. So that coverage alias is just going through and running the Go testing stuff through a nice little formatter. I will put details on how to get that in the README at some point after that. I don't particularly want to show all my aliases because there's a whole bunch of stuff set in there which I honestly don't know if there's anything proprietary in there or not. Anyway, that's now tested. The last thing was, let's just commit those for now. So we've got that and that, which we can, actually before we do that, let's make it, just to make sure. Last thing I want is a build failing because I haven't done the linting. And there we go. So that was complaining because I just by default pretty much type in printf. And what I actually wanted was println because we haven't got any formatting directives. So that would have actually caused the build to fail. So just worth checking that everything is good to go before you actually commit the thing. So we will commit that. And we're going to say this fixes number 5. Add status. Action, not important. Right, so the other thing I was just mentioning was the whole listing for its name. In fact, now we're setting the name. This could actually be wrong with the name being set elsewhere. So I'm going to get rid of this prefix because no, I'm not. I'm going to get rid of that. So what we're saying now is that the bot is going to respond with just an exclamation mark. What I will probably do is make that prefix configurable, and then we can update the config file. But just for now, just improve life a little bit. So let's commit this. So this is just going under 5, not fixing it. Which means command prefix to bang. And the git ignore just needs to go in as well. What are we doing here? Ignore the config file. So that should be everything. So we can review this. Which browser are you going to open on? Wrong browser. Oh dear. There's the CSS loading very slowly. So we want to close that after we've merged it, create the pull request, and then let's just have a look at what we've done. So we added the config file to the git ignore, which is good. We've added our status action. We've got our test, and we've got our action, and the change that we did for the prefix, which is cool. So one of the things we want to just quickly do is let's quick off the mark there. That was in the other channel. However, there was some other stuff as well which I thought possibly would not be appropriate. Hence the this channel. But if we just make sure the bot is responding. There we go, and this is the old version of the code. We haven't deployed anything yet, so it's requiring the bang_astio, and it won't do anything with versions or statuses. Oops. Also, just double checking that I haven't collided with any commands for other bots there. Not entirely sure what the other bots on here do yet in terms of their command set. So if we go back to our pull request, we're ready to merge. So click the approve button. In that goes. So if you remember, what's happened with this build is it's gone through, it's built the code, it's run the tests, it's linted the code, and it's built a test Docker deployment should I want to pull that Docker deployment down and play with it. And that Docker deployment has been tagged with the branch name. So if I want to spin that up anywhere and have a mess around with it for whatever reason, I can do. Now that I've merged it, another build is kicking off, and that is building another Docker image that is tagged with main. And that allows me to effectively pull what would be a release candidate and have a play around with that. So if we had a QA step, before releasing to live, we would be throwing this main image up to a QA server somewhere, or a QA deployment somewhere for people to play with. And what we would probably have in that case is a manual step for well, actually, we still have a manual step, but yeah, once QA has been signed off, we might have an extra step that just says, QA has signed this off. So one of the things we just need to do while we're waiting on this screen is make a note of the version number. So we were at 0.0.7. I am going to go out on a limb here. I'm going to push the boat out, and I'm going to suggest that since this is now running permanently in AWS and the bot will just be there, that we are now ready to tag this as version 0.1. That may come back to bite me if we watch the whole thing fall over in a crumpled heap when we actually do the deployment, but nothing ventured, nothing gained. So that's built. So to release, all I need to do is tag it. That now kicks off my final build. That will create the final Docker image and will push that up to ECS. So that will cause a new version of the bot to start running. Now, I'm not entirely sure if it will go up straight away. One of the things I haven't checked with this is how it goes about putting one instance down before it sets the next one up, and we may have an issue where the bot doesn't connect. So we may find that it falls over because it can't connect because there's a bot already there. But we shall see. It'll be a learning experience for all of us. Now, one of the other things you can do with this process, if you don't want to be rebuilding the image each time, in fact, do I rebuild the image each time? Let's actually go have a look. Yes, I do. But one of the things you could actually do, if you didn't want to rebuild the image each time, is you could say in your various steps, you probably want to rebuild the main image because that's now merged into the main branch, and then maybe slight changes to your development branch. But once you've got that main branch built and tagged and pushed up to ECR, you could just easily on your version tag pull that down and just retag it with latest and the version number, so that you're using the same Docker image. I'm just relying on the fact that the builds are so close to each other that nothing will have changed, and also that what we are actually building, there's there's no risk of the libraries changing because they're all listed in the GoSum file. But yeah, if you've got a situation where perhaps you're doing an npm install or whatever and it's going off to the internet and pulling down what might be newer versions of libraries, you can just turn around and say, right, I want to retag my my main image to be my latest image. There's a number of ways you can handle this. Right, so this is VPC. I don't want to be at VPC. I want to be in the Elastic Container Service and see what's going on. So we've got one running task and one pending task. Although I think... Right, so number 12 is the one we want running. Number 11 is the one that wants to be shutting down. Question is, will number 12 start up correctly? Why has number 12 done that? I know exactly why it's done that, and that is because you remember I changed the name of the config file, and stupidly I did not update this setup. But one of the things you should notice, if we go to Discord, bot's still there. Because it hasn't actually been able to fire up the new instance, it hasn't taken down the old one, which is one of the things that I'm a little bit concerned about, but just want to make sure that we can actually connect. But I'm hoping that Discord will just kill the old connection. Anyway, let's go find out where that thing is. Let's just do a find. Finding files. It's not in there. Right. Let's just check that that is our latest one. It started out. Yes. So that is the one we want. That went off GoBot 12. So why did you get? Because that one should be running. Looking in the wrong place. It is, of course, in our settings, and I think it's under our deployment settings because it's part of the deployment. So that one under ECS. That's the one. that should all now be correct. So what I can do is go, can I rerun that pipeline? Let's have a look. Let's have a look. Pipelines. Actually, I might even just be able to do this. Deployments. ECS. Redeploy. No. Well, that didn't work. Rerun. So there is a very good chance that we are going to pick up sponsorship from another continuous integration provider. And things like this would be a perfect advert for them. I use Bitbucket because it's what I use for my day job. I think most people use GitHub these days. I made the move from GitHub to Bitbucket before they put in the GitHub pipeline type stuff. And because I'd already made the move, I really couldn't be bothered to move back. And sadly, I come from more corporate worlds where Atlassian is the stack. There's not much you can do to get away from that. So I end up in an Atlassian world all the time. It's nice to not actually be using Jira for this project. Anyway, hopefully this will go up fairly quickly. And then we're going to find out what's going on with the two instances running with the bot. Now, we might be able to play around with how Fargate is deploying these. We shall see. If not, we can put in some more mighty hacks. Like, hey, I'm running. But actually I'm going to wait for 30 seconds before I start up. Or connect to Discord. Because sometimes hacks are the way forward. Let's just get that up and out. I guess that's all built. And we should have so version 12 has gone away. And version 13 is now provisioning to go up and start running. It's normally quite quick, but can sometimes take a few minutes. Okay, that's running. Fantastic. Right, next question is it actually running? Let's go have a look at our logs. Bot is running. And then we can go have a look at Discord and see if it's actually started up yet. There we go. So that deployment has gone out automatically with the build and tagging it. You can see it's picked up its version information from the tag, and there's the build date. So now we can see what version we're running and what's out and what's going on. So that's us having added an endpoint. So we now have plenty of time to go off and do some more useful types of endpoint and doing some more useful work. So there's a few things that we want this bot to do. One of the things we have is we have a bot called Me6. It's an off-the-shelf bot that you can get, and it rewards you for chatting. It gives you a certain amount of experience points for a chat every minute. So it's to avoid spamming by not giving experience for every chat. And the reason why this was put in was because we wanted to encourage people to interact on the Discord server. But one of the things that we want to encourage is actually interaction on development things, very much like Stack Overflow with, I have a question, here's an answer. So one of the things we would like the bot to be able to do is some way of rewarding a good answer. Because the biggest problem that we have with Me6 is the fact that, I think Me6 is on here, yes, I use Discord a lot, and the next ranked person, which I think is Liam, is somewhere behind me. So this isn't really a fair system. I've been disqualified from the ranking for quite a while. So we would like to try and implement this new system. That means I'm going to have to persist things. And that means that I need to write to some kind of storage. Now, ordinarily, I would write to a database. But I don't know how Amazon's DynamoDB works. I've never used it before, so I don't want to be using that live on this stream. I haven't had a chance to learn it. And using RDS for this will be expensive. The bot is going to cost me about $5 a month, which I don't mind paying, but if you start putting an RDS instance in there as well, it's going to just mount up the costs. So we're going to use S3 buckets. This is a cost-driven solution, not a technology-driven solution. I would not normally say use S3 buckets. So the first thing we want to do is actually get the bot storing things to S3. So we're going to add a storage command or something like that. So let's we want to go to issues and create ourselves a new issue. Let's create the issue, and we can allow the bot to in S3. No, S3. And what we're going to do for this is we're going to use Go's ability to parse JSON into and out of Go types. So it's going to be a little hacky, but we are going to be treating S3 as a document store. Now, because there can only ever be one instance of the bot running at any given time, the way we're going to handle storage is to say we're going to flush the in-memory storage to S3 every period, I don't know, make that configurable, and we are going to respect sig term and flush when we get one of those. You can't ignore a sig kill. So if something like that happens, we're falling over and we're going to lose whatever was stored beforehand, but that's by the by. Anyway, so this is issue number 6, yes. So we didn't actually need this new branch that I created. So I can just hijack it and say, this is now issue 6. So we need to use the S3 libraries. Now, you can use HTTPS with what I've got set up to pull documents from S3, but we can't use them to write to S3. So we are going to need to use the Amazon library for one half of it. We may as well use it for all of it. So one of the things I need to do, just trying to think, where do I have, yes. I already have somewhere, learn how to alphabet, it's under M. I already have some code here that writes to an Amazon S3 bucket. Here's my upload code. So this actually takes a look at the Me6 data that's been gathered about the group and just does some munching to it and throws it up onto S3. So we're going to steal this. Yoink. And we are probably going to say that our storage is going to be handled outside of the actions, because multiple actions will probably want storage. So I'm going to create the idea of a store, and we're going to abstract away the fact that we are using S3 because this may get changed later to use something better. I may learn how to use DynamoDB and use that instead, because that doesn't look like it would cost too much. So we're going to call this package store. I'm not calling it database or anything like that, because I'm actually agnostic to how stuff is stored. It is just a store. And then within that, we're going to want to have a I suppose CRUD would probably be the best thing to do here, although how are we going to look at this? We're going to be uploading multiple files, single files. Let's go with a single file for now. So at the moment, we really just want to have a sort of an update which creates if need be, and a read. So that just becomes a sort of a put and a get using the HTTP type terminology. So let's just create ourselves a put and a get. There we go. And we also need a doc. So, package store handles interaction with the backing store. Fantastic. So a get and put are effectively just going to be interfaces, because we don't want to be tying what's going on. And let's actually handle multiple types. So while I've still got this in my cut and paste buffer, we're going to want to have a store type. I'm going to shove that in a subdirectory of store, and I'm going to say this is S3. This is our put. So we're organising this so that we can have multiple implementations of our store. Don't know if that's going to require syncing for everything or not. There's obviously a newer version of the SDK out since I last downloaded it. And it does somewhat upset me that the AWS SDK involves a few other packages. Go is by no means as bad as some other languages in terms of the sort of the package explosion you get, but I do like to try and keep my my package reliance quite small. Generally, I will only use a logging package and an HTTP router package. Everything else is not really needed. It's all in the main language. And then I have a few little wrapper things which are just conveniences for me. And obviously this needs to use the Discord package because we're talking to Discord. You will, however, notice no left pad. So apologies, my machine is now indexing all of that, and because of OBS it is screaming away. We can take a look at the amount of CPU that's been used, and this blue circle here tells us that it's all of the CPU is being used while it does that indexing. Meanwhile, we can take a look at what this code's doing. So we're uploading a file to S3. The bucket is the S3 bucket we're uploading it to. The key is the name of the piece of data that is being uploaded, and the data is the data that's been uploaded as a string. So that lends itself quite nicely to Json. And one of the things we can do is we can turn around and we say put. We will know what bucket is being used. That will be configured by the app itself. So we probably don't need the bucket. The key we will need, and the data will take as something that isn't a string. Now, one of the things that was going to be very apparent is the fact that we are going to need to know what our config details are, because we're going to need to configure the bucket from here. So we are, I might just change that, rename that to AWS. Yes. Rename that to S3, and then we can put the whole thing in here. So we can have our type S3, which is just going to have a bucket, which will be a string. That should do for now. And then on that we're going to have a function on that, so we'll have a put, and we will have a get. Now our put, we're going to want to have the key that we're using, and it's going to be a string, some data. Now I don't really care about the data, so here we're just going to say I want data, an interface, which in Go just says anything. Anything matches interface, empty interface. We're saying this is something with any functions on it or no functions on it. Any piece of data. This is not generics. Should point out, Go doesn't have generics. Go 2 is going to, but this is not generics. You have to do some quite nasty stuff under the covers if you want to start typing this, which I've done for the configuration things, and I don't recommend it. Right, what's going to happen here is we are likely going to have to return an error. Even if putting to S3 or whatever didn't error, it's likely that other things will, and we're going to pull these functions out and put them into our interface. So let's just have a look and see. Just wondering about whether or not we need to create a new uploader each time. I think I'm going to, because I'm worried about things timing out. We can always look at that later. So we've got our uploader. The session.must, basically session.new session can return an error. So session.must swallows that error and panics if we can't do anything with it. And to be honest, with the code that we're dealing with here, there's no point in continuing running if we haven't got access to our backing store. We may as well just fall over in a crumpled heap. Although that said, I suppose the bot could report. Okay, let's do that. Of course, we're already using S. Just call it S session. Idiomatic Go does use very short variable names. I seem to swing between using the shortest possible variable name, i.e. a single letter, a few common shortenings like CTX or context, or the full word. There is no halfway house for me. Right, so we can't do the shorthand error handling because we need that session thing, but if error is not equal to nil, return error f. There we go. So that could be handed up by anything, and maybe the bot can report on those. So we can now take our session and shove it in there. Right, what do we do next? Right, I'm not not actually doing with. And, the reason why I've split this out is because if I have it as a compound if, you've then got your if going over multiple lines, which can look a bit messy. So we can just take this, quick, and we're actually going to need to change something here. Right, you can go. Bye-bye. What are you whinging about? No new variables. Of course not. Right. Our bucket comes from our type. Data's of the wrong type because, of course, it wants a string. However, we can get the Json format by just calling json.marshall. So that takes our interface and it will go through and using some well-documented rules, convert that JSON, convert that interface to a JSON, or convert that data type to a JSON object. And effectively what happens is structs turn into JSON objects, slices turn into JSON lists, strings, balls, numbers and stuff get converted appropriately, nils go to null, and there's a few extra bits that you can do because it will only extract the public parts of an interface of a type. For example, here this would render as the JSON object of shove that there. This would come out as actually it's JSON, so we need that, which may not be what we want. JSON is typically lowercase, so we are able to use a special tag notation with backticks and say that when this gets handled by the JSON marshaller, actually use this key. So that would generate that JSON. But for now, we can be fairly agnostic about what's coming in. So, why are you whinging? That collides. It's going to have to be Sass. Right, so our marshaller can go wrong. There are some things that can't be marshalled into JSON. Go channels are one of the classic examples, which I use for all of my testing. You try and marshal a Go channel into JSON and it just goes BAM. So if not equal ball this time, we're going to chuck out an error. Marshal data. Store data, just give us some hint about where we are. And last but not least, B is a byte slice, but we can cast that to a string very easily. And then here we've got failed to upload data to S3. Get rid of that. And that should be our uploading thing. I don't actually have an equivalent get, so this may be reading the instructions somewhat. However, I'm going to guess that we're going to want one of these. Okay, let's take this, all of this. I know this is going to return an error, so let's just bung it in there. And we're probably going to want a key. And what we're going to do, because I don't want to return interface, because then you run into all kinds of problems about what type it is and everything, I'm going to accept an interface here, and we'll see why in a bit. So this isn't an uploader, this is a downloader. There we go. And that wants a config provider and may need to go read the... let's go RTFM. Blink. AWS go S3 get. You may notice I've read these documents a number of times, probably for the put side. Using the client, upload managers, don't care about that. Download manager, some example code. Let's not read the code, let's just cut and paste the code, because that's what we do. Yoink. Right. Oh, please tell me you're not going to download into a file. We may need to circumvent that. Right, so S3 manager, new downloader. Oh, okay, so it is still SES. Cool. And then we're not going to do OS create file name because I am hoping this takes something sensible. Yes, it does. An IO writer at. I have no idea what an IO writer at is. Let's go have a look. So it's got a write at interface. Hopefully. Let's just have a look and see whether this matches. No. Right, back to the Googles. Let's actually put that as one word. And someone who is doing exactly the same stuff as us has asked the question that we want. Oh, they've got a write-out buffer. Okay, cool. So our buffer becomes a write-at buffer. I have no idea what the difference between the two is. Let's do that. And that can go there. So I mean, this is a classic example of developers don't necessarily know everything, and there is an awful lot of Googling that goes on. I'm just seeing why. I think they're doing it a slightly different way. Grab that as well. Let's shove this here. Right, AWS run. Oh, okay. That'll be why. We were not using the function to initialize it. We were using a we were just initializing it raw. So that is now good. Our request input is that up there, but we don't need that because we're inlining it, so that can just all go away. And I'm just going to check how they were buffed or bytes. Fantastic. So I'm assuming something else is going to go. Don't care about n. N is the number of bytes that have been downloaded, and honestly, I'm going to assume that things are going to error if the byte length, well, if anything goes wrong, I'm not going to be checking byte lengths. So we can use s.bucket here. That's the key. And now we have a buffer with the bytes. So how do we get them out? Well, the way we do that, you can go as well now, is again, we're going to use the JSON package, and this time we're going to say that just equal to json.marshal, unmarshal. And in fact, what I might do, just while I'm thinking about it, just because if I've got to go through and read that JSON, it makes sense to make it slightly more human readable. So all this is saying is just marshal the JSON out as a nicely formatted string using 2 spaces for padding. Anyway, back here, so we're doing JSON.unmarshal, and the way that we do the unmarshalling is we say here is our set of bytes, and here is the interface that we want to unmarshal into. Now, provided that we call this get function with a pointer to an interface, then that'll get populated when this function is returned, because effectively you're pointed to a memory location, so that memory location is going to get updated with all the stuff that should go into the type. So that means that I can actually pass in a strongly typed thing and deal with that strongly typed thing, whereas down here in the guts of the implementation, I don't care about the type, it's just a type of interface. And that gets away from the need to have generics. So the last thing to do, actually we've got 2 error handling bits we need to deal with. So here we failed to download data, S3 data, and here we failed to marshal S3 data, and then we just return it. Cool. So that looks like we've got a fairly nice store interface. It's a document store. This would need to change if we were using sort of some kind of SQL database, although we can abstract away the keys and stuff and perhaps have the key pointing to a table. That's a problem for another day. So I'm going to take this. Actually, first of all, hey, this is going to need a doc.go. Let's put that in there. Go. So if I was to move on to using RDS or whatever, I can shove it in this package. This is just the AWS package. And then we no longer need get and put, because we've actually now just got a single store type. Did I go overboard with my delete there? Yes. Oh no, I'll tell you what happened. Same thing that happened last time. Because I was looking at that file, when I deleted it, it went off to a different package. And then of course I'm in the S3 bit of V6, not getting caught out by that again. Right, so we've got rid of that. Now I really don't want to call this store, because then you're going to have store. Perhaps store in my winch, we'll see. So this is going to be an interface. It's a storer as well. So the idiomatic go with small interfaces is to really to take the thing that it's doing and put on the end. This is also a getter and things like this. Persister. I'll just call it persist. there we go. May revisit that name later. If you hadn't noticed by now, I spend a lot of time actually making sure that the types and the function names are semantically good, so that it makes sense when you're actually reading the code and using the code. Right, so we've defined what this is going to look like, so we want to put and again. And what we're saying here is basically we can now pass around a persistent store, or persistent type. I'm not keen on that name, we'll deal with that later. Rather than my particular implementation, and so all the details are abstracted away. Now this is going to be hard to test because putting things up to S3 is a pain, because you've got to expose an S3 bucket and give permissions to everything and so on and so forth. So I'm not actually going to bother, but what we do need to do is just add some documentation on here. So it's storing or persisting S3 bucket. Now, annoyingly, I'm going to have to duplicate some documentation. So persistent types are able to store and retrieve documents, JSON documents, let's be specific, from a backing store. And we're going to define what these do, so put a document into the backing store. The provided data must marshal to JSON. And get a document from the backing store. Must be a pointer to now. I can put in code that checks whether you've passed me a pointer or not, which does help with a certain class of error, but it's a programmer error, and actually the code's quite involved. You need to do some reflections on things, and you need to work out whether it's a pointer or what it's pointing to, and it's easier just to turn around and go, why is this not being populated? When you're looking at your particular action and then realise, I'm not sending a pointer through. So for now, we will just rely on the programmer to read the documentation, which is a stretch, but you never know. Right. So we are going to have to, sadly, because of the way that interfaces are handled, Go doesn't know that this is documented already, although we may change the documentation here a little bit. Into S3. Is there anything else you want to say about this? Seems the AWS credentials are already configured. That is something we may need to deal with. No, it's something we will have to deal with. They are in the config file, and AWS does provide a way of hacking it in. CLI. Oh, there was something in here. Yeah, static credentials. That's the one. So it allows me to set the ID, the secret, and the token. I'm just thinking, I don't think I need the token. Token is only required for temporary, so yes, I just need the ID and the secret, which is going to come from the config. So that means that, I mean, we could handle all of these things independently, but actually, let's just take a config file. So we'll take settings.config, config.settings. That one. We no longer have the bucket in there, so we're going to have to wire that in. And then I'm going to leave myself a nasty and the reason why I'm doing that is because if I try and commit this before finishing that to do, I've got Golang set up to whinge at me. But for now it just means that we've got our AWS bucket there, and also here. Right, so we want new credentials. Yeah. We may need to play around with this a little bit. So that's AWS.new credentials. No. Right, let's see if autocomplete can help us here. New static credentials. Ah, credentials. Of course it is. Not in there. Get rid of you. That they say could be blank. That is going to be from our config. No, our settings, which is s.aws access key, and this becomes s.aws secret key. Now we've got some credentials. Where do we want to put them? In here, I guess. Let's just see what you're doing. Oops. Okay, so we can pass in a pointer to aws.config and credentials, creds. Oh, you're just whinging about. I'll just call you C. I might shove in the region as well while we're at it. It's not this region. Pointed at the region. And that's now going over the end of the line, so we'll do that. Okay. I do need to look up and see how long the session lasts for, but for now we will just duplicate that. No. What are you returning? Session and an error. So what we're going to do instead is you're an AWS session. AWS session. You're a session.session. So now we can do away with that. Oops. So we can then put in some code later, where I can persist the session up in the in the struct and check if it's alive and various other things if I need to. For now, we're just going to be spawning new sessions, and they should be garbage collected because we're not persisting them beyond the function calls. But that's a worry for another day. Right, so unwind the stack. We were writing documentations. It no longer assumes the AWS credentials are set. So again, writing documentation has helped me think about how this is going to be used, forced me to address various things. No, we don't want that one. We want it from here. This one, yoink. From S3. Must be no front end of that. We don't need anything else. Cool. Session doesn't need to be documented because it is private. It's not doing anything particularly fancy, I think. We're done for that. Right, so I can add the store. We can just quickly make sure that there's nothing hideous about my code. Get the linter across it. Hasma's given me a +1 for modularity and appropriate naming convention. It's many, many years of not doing that, which has caused me to start doing that. Yes, I know it's got it to do, so I'm going to assume the rest of it is fine. Right, so let's get rid of this. Now we need to go down here, and we'll just copy this one. May start splitting these out into separate settings blocks as they get more complex. No, it's AWS bucket. So one of the things that I have with other systems, this is quite a complex one, where I have loads of config files, and each one basically takes a subsection of the config JSON. So you would split this out, so you'd have an AWS object in your JSON, and then you would have region and so on and so forth. Anyway, AWS bucket. We're connecting to Presley storage. Call it bucket and bucket, and by default, nothing. Mainly because I don't want things accidentally writing into a bucket that I may have already set up. So that should now be it for the persistence side of things. We just need to set up the store and start using it. Now look at the time. We've got half of 1 hour. Should be enough. Okay, so that all builds nicely. So let's commit this. Oops. Commit file. This is issue number 6, and we are add AWS bucket to settings. Shove that in. And come on. and a persistent mechanism. Right. Oh, and our Go Mod and Go Some have been updated because, of course, we've now got the AWS SDK in there. So, we'll commit those. Nope, it's an SDK. 3 letters, how hard can it be allowed to type? That should be everything. Cool. Right. Following on from the fact that this bot has very, I think childish is the correct term here, very childish roots. The way that I'm going to handle just checking whether the storage works, it's not going to be anything particularly flash. We've only got like 25 minutes to do stuff. And I'm just going to add a new command. It's going to be very basic, so I'm just going to yoink out the actually I might yoink out the status one because that's even simpler. And we're going to call our command more, spelt the correct way. Need to tell the spell checker that that is actually a real word. Although technically I think it should be spelled like that, but yeah, more. And this is going to take I'm going to call it that because you normally talk about database drivers. And in situations like this, I actually have driver types. Sorry, that name was bugging me. So let's just refactor, rename driver. Shouldn't make any other issues. So let's just commit that. The capitals. In it goes. Right. So I'm going to change the start status to an m.more, or m.more even. Now, one of the things I can do here, store is private to this type, so I can actually have a counter. Make it public, and I can use my more type to store that, but I'm going to have pointer functions because I'm modifying the struct. So if I don't have a pointer function, what happens is that this function will run on a copy of the type. So if I implement the counter in this function, that copy is then thrown away after the function's run, so you won't actually see the caller won't see the type updated. If I run it on a pointer to the struct, then the caller will see the changes happening. And that's why you may actually see in Go things like this, rather than that, because very contrived example here, but it can be harder. Actually, let's change that to an interface type. That would be some interface. It's harder to do the pointer calls and stuff. Much harder to associate the pointer calls and things on there. You end up tying yourself in knots. So you just make life simpler for yourself if you're dealing with pointers, if everything's in the struct, not the struct itself. Right, so more action. What are we going to do for handle? So we will, on return, or on the case of more, we are just going to what are we going to say? We're going to say OK. Actually, let's do this. So we go m.counter plus plus, and then we will say counter nil. So that's nice and simple. How are we going to handle the storage? I'm just trying to think now whether the endpoint should handle its own storage or whether storage should be handled centrally. I think centrally at the moment is going to be a little bit of a stretch too far. I'll have to think about that over the next week. We may centralize it later. For now, we are going to we're going to handle it here. Now, one of the drawbacks of what I have just done is that I need an empty file up there. I need some way to initialize our document store, because if it tries to go get a file and that doesn't exist, it'll die. And if we write a file, we're going to overwrite whatever's there, so we don't want to write an empty file up. So for the time being, I'm going to ignore that problem and simply upload a file as an empty counter. Right, so we're going to need some other functions here. Put these at the bottom actually. So we're going to need an init function. Don't think we need to pass anything else in. If we need to later, we can always extend, because this will probably end up being part of an interface. And all we're going to say for our init function is we are going to say that m.store dot get more .json, which will be our key. I should actually put the key, more key. I don't like the fact that I've got JSON on the end of that. I think what might happen is we will go back to our S3 driver and get it to put JSON on the end of the key name. But for now, we need to more key. Hasman was just asking about the naming convention for the test. Yes, by convention, tests have _test on the end of the name, so it knows it's a test file. It handles those separately. So when you tell Go, please go run my tests, it will go and look at all the _test files, and will ignore other things. And you keep them in the same directory as their counterpart. One of the things to note, I've pointed out in one of the previous sessions, was worth re-mentioning, is you can have a special test package within your package. Normally you can't have multiple packages in a package, but you can say this is a special test package, so please take me out of the package I'm in, so I have to test it as if I was an external observer. It is possible to test from within the package, so change that to just package actions and test private things. But the linter I've got set up whinge at me if I do that. And generally it's a sign that you've got some issue with your architecture. Anyway, what do we do? So we want to pass in a pointer to, actually we've already got a pointer to us, m. So I think if we're lucky, apparently there's have your say on the persister up on Twitter. The persister is now gone. It's now a driver. I had my say. I didn't like it. Right, there's an error here. Equal to nil. Oops. Drink. That is almost certainly going to whinge at me. I want me to split that out, but we'll leave it for now. Right, so what we're saying here is when we initialize ourselves, go get the thing that's stored under this key and apply it to ourselves. And the Json unmarshaller will go, if we set up the thing correctly, oh, I need to unmarshal this particular thing. Doesn't see store because that's private. Now, let's make our JSON slightly nicer and use a lowercase. If you are reading from a JSON file, it will automatically handle lowercase if you haven't specified. But if you're writing out, which we will be when we're handling this, we have to explicitly state that we want a lowercase thing. Right, so we need to do some more stuff here. We need to turn around and we need to say m.store put key and us. We're going to return format ref. No, we're going to return I believe that's spelled correctly. Yes, it is. Need to make sure that you spell things correctly. And I say it is spelled correctly. So I think, if I remember rightly, this is actually going to get swallowed for now, but we can deal with that later. So we are now hopefully persisting our count and reading it if we initialize our more handler. I'm not going to write a test for this because I've got a store and I don't have a mock store. What we can do next week, just looking at the time, is we can actually write a mock store, and then it doesn't matter that we are ordinarily storing this to S3. I can create a mock in-memory store, but for now we'll leave this untested, but we will turn around and say initialize the handler. No, the action. I can't even spell handler. Init the action. So we wanted to go back to here Just want to create a suffix .json. Oops. And that. Oops. Done again. Okay, so that way it's going to be stored as a nice .json file in S3, but I don't have to care about the fact that it's JSON or anything like that. Here I can just use this particular key. So let's commit that. I'm also thinking about subdirectories. We'll deal with that later. I think you just put it into the key. I'll read about that later. We're not going to have enough types for me to worry about it all going into the root of the S3 bucket for now. So we can leave it. This is our more action. Let's just check that's going to go fine. While that's happening, we'll go down here and we will say there's not more. I have to know how to store. So that's going to clash. Too many options. Store.driver. I can do it up here. So we're going to turn around and say that this is a var driver store.driver, and that's coming from this one. And the reason why I was setting it up here is because I want to force its type. Down here, I'm just going to share a store. 3 dot. AWS to S3. That one's the settings. There we go. Spot the deliberate mistake. So up here, because that's private, we're going to need a constructor function. Nope. Yes. There's a combination of words I never thought to see before. Driver, oops. And that's going to return a pointer to more. Nope, a pointer to more. Now I'm thinking I'm not going to initialize here, and the for y will appear apparent in a second. And that I'm going to change my handler interface to include that. what will need to happen there is we're going to need to add that to here. And we're going to need to add that to here. The reason why I'm doing that is because down here, this becomes a new more driver. We can now range through this just going to call it irreverent because we're using a I'm going to range through the set of actions. Need the keyword range on that, and we can now do if equals e.init, and then what are we doing? We're doing log.irs. Oh, I was reading up about Logos yesterday, and Fatal will apparently just... Oh no, that needs to be an error because we need the usage. That needs to be an error. But yeah, we can Fatal, which will do the exit one for us. So if that, we can just log dot with error dot fatal initialize actions. So if we have other actions that have more complex initializations, which we almost certainly will, it'll just get picked up straight away. We don't have to handle doing it individually. So that should be everything. And with 7 minutes to go, can we get this deployed and running, or can we get this deployed and falling flat on its face? Right, what have we done? We have... let's just sort these out first. Git. Right, number 6, and init types. Sadly aware that my coverage has dropped even more because I'm not testing that particular thing. I will raise an issue to fix that. We'll look at that next week. This should be, fingers crossed, fixing it. Add more action to test persistence, and all actions. Excellent. So, get that off for review. This is worrying. I know I know the stream's still working. I can see it on my iPad. It's just my my internet being slow. Ding 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 ding. So quite a lot went into that. Although possibly not as much as it may look from the amount of commits we've done. So we need to review this. So we've added AWS, and you look at all the packages it's pulled in, upsetting. Cobol, we're now putting in the stuff for the store, setting our driver. initializing our actions. Just tidying stuff up there. Added our initialize function. More. Added the init functions to that. Added our bucket and allowed us to configure our bucket. Put in the S3 handler. Put in the get, which we can paste, so it should be okay. There's our store type. Right, I am just going to give that a few seconds to build. There's a couple of things that we need to do. First of all, and yes, I am about to use vi in an IDE, just because it's easier. Oops, JSON file, counter, set that to 0, and close that. So we need to put that up onto S3 so that we have something to read. For our init function, like I said, we need to deal with that initialization edge case in a bit. And the other thing we're going to need to do is with the config.json, which I am going to do in a different screen because keys and stuff. Right, so AWS bucket was pretty sure you just put in the that name. And was there anything else that we needed to put in there? My Spidey sense is telling me we added something else. Token. Go back to our review and just have a quick look. AWS region. No, I think that's all for the config. Okay, so let's see what that's built. Let's write that out. Oops. Yes. Bucket. Right. That's written out. Okay. I can approve this. I can merge this, so that build's going to kick off while we are doing stuff. We'll go back here. So we need to upload some files. I've altered the config file, so I'm going to add that as well. But those are the two files. Let's upload those. And the other thing that we're going to need to do is allow write access. Now at the moment our permissions are for read, permissions, thank you, AWS get object, so we need to be able to do AWS write object or something like that. It's file policy generator. I hate this tool. S3 bucket policy, allow, don't care about that. Tempted to just say all actions, but no, bad idea. Almost certainly going to need list bucket. Possibly list bucket versions. put object. There we go. I think that should be enough. No. I can't be bothered. Okay, so it's put object and list bucket. How do those get separated? Most other things have a nice little JSON editor. Right, okay. So the action just becomes a list. These are easy enough to update if we need to. What are you whinging about? Bad string. Stole a biscuit. Statement, state of fact, principle, action. Well, let's just try saving it and see whether it... yes. Bad error message is what it should have been. Right, so I think that's enough. We will possibly find out. So hopefully this has now built. We're running over ever so slightly, but I just want to get this pushed. Let's tag this. 0.1, oops, 1.1, create that tag, off it goes. So we're either going to end on a massive celebration because this all works, which I seriously doubt, or we're going to end with our opening for next week, which will be let's fix up what's gone wrong when this starts up. We will just pop back to the container service, and well, apparently there's quite the controversy on that Twitter thread. Well, there will be if you tweet a work in progress, where I explicitly said I'm not particularly happy with the name. Things are gonna hot up. If they can come up with a better name than driver, I will accept it. I am always happy to accept improvements. This is one of the things that I've learned over my far too long of programming, is that you just don't need to be precious about your code. If someone looks up and goes, you can do that better, try doing this, great. It's a learning opportunity. It can help. And there have been examples where I've spent 2 years, literally 2 years, trying to name something properly and never been happy with the name that's been given, only to have someone vaguely non-technical as well turn around and go, you should call it this. And I've gone, yeah, I should. Such is life. I'm just going to see where this pipeline's at. Right, we are going to have to leave it there then. Unfortunately, my account has run out of build minutes. So I will go put in my credit card details. I did wonder whether that would happen at some point. I'm currently on the free tier for this particular project. That is intensely annoying. However, next week I will be on the minimum paid plan and $15 a month poorer. But this gets used for a lot of other things. So all that remains is to say thank you very much for joining me on what has been hopefully an enlightening continuation on building a bot. We've had successes which we didn't have last week. Like I say, I'm not entirely convinced that this build is going to work because we've done a whole bunch of stuff without really testing it, and I expect things to go wrong, but that's not a bad thing. That's just we haven't tested this yet. So that testing will happen next week. We will tidy up the tests. We will create ourselves a mock driver repository, key store, save this for later, names are coming in, and sort of just tidy up what we've done, and then hopefully we will have everything that's required to turn this bot into something that we can actually start using, albeit just to increase a counter. We'll sort that over the coming weeks. Smash the like button, follow, join the Discord, do the tweets, go to the Patreon, and you know, $1 a month is great. It absolutely helps us. What we do is all done for free. So if you can afford $1 a month, that was absolutely brilliant. Thank you very much. If you can't, don't worry about it. There is no expectation. And if you're a Bezos, please put $1 million a month in. Anyway, all that remains is for me to say goodbye, and I will see you next week.